Back in 2012, this place was the site of the worst battle in history.
You are the dumbest motherfucker.
Throughout the course of history, man has resorted to battle as an ultimate form of change. Good or bad, the heart has yearned for nothing more than the chance to engage in collective overcoming with the bros. In battle, in blood, and in bed. Yes.
Being raised in Southern California, there is an underlying presumption from both extra-state onlookers and the sentiments of natives that we are inherently blessed to live here. And I tend to agree that the blue skies, mild winters, and proximity to the ocean provide a vast sprawl of natural beauty and sweet, breathable air. However, amidst this lack of climate-related strain, aside from the surprisingly hot summers and horrid Santa Anas, there is another strain that stems from the hegemony of horrid urban design, a design that forces us Californians to prioritize our cars over ourselves, and neighborhood design that looks to create more places to park than places to interact with people and commerce without having to friggin' drive 15 minutes. In this design is the very easy path towards isolation. When you spend your childhood in a Californian suburb, you tend to rarely find the motivation or stimulation that keeps you active and attentive outdoors. If you're not driving to the beach, the mountains, or some recreational event, you're more than likely sitting at home waiting for the next thing. Amidst this isolation, it becomes very easy to idolize long-gone eras of social crossover that you only got to faintly whiff in public history courses. For instance, in my 2012 7th grade year, I ventured into the shallow end of the pool of Roman history. My teacher, Miss Shaw, quickly toured us from the early Roman city-states, detailing the squabbles with Visigoths, Persians, and the crusty enclaves of Germanic barbarians. We then kept on into the Holy Roman Empire, capping it off with the showing of the film, The Fall of the Roman Empire. And my mind was easily captured by the Hollywood depiction of Roman legions battling across the Mediterranean to capture land, and revel in a sense of camaraderie and identity that I was just dipping my toes into at home. See, our little hidden neighborhood enclave in the suburbs, the apartments, were a hidden gem of social dynamisty, a pantheon of crusty apartment dwellers, fellow kids full of energy and areas to explore, was what I could look forward to after long days of history, math, and science lessons. The apartment antics that I've engaged in were more than just an escape, but more importantly, a social practice ground. All of this culminated in group efforts and ambitions that more often than not went nowhere. There was no shortage of neighborhood-wide antics to engage with. During this particular autumn of 2012, just as my 8th grade year had reached its comforting markers of NFL football, cooler weather, and the early trimmings of pumpkin spice excess, our neighborhood had found itself in the midst of a new project.
Whoa, boy, bad boy. Alright. Now, just behind me on this hill, sits a 20 to 30 feet tall shrubbery of willow trees. Now, these trees behind me served as the perfect nesting ground for our own brand of tree houses. Now, rather than head over to Home Depot and get some lumber supply, we decided to methodically carve out all this bush in the shrubbery here, which eventually left us with this huge space. Oh. Now every day after school, boys and girls would come to the treehouse and help get all this stuff out.
By month's midpoint, By month's midpoint, we were able to hollow out one tree and make decent progress on another right next to it. The process was a collective effort, one which invigorated in me a cheap thrill of emulation. And just like the Romans, we created fortresses that could host our future ambitions. Just as I had witnessed in class history, we used a cultural backing to create an unnecessary necessity. And through this, we were able to physically transform a measly part of our corner of the world. Yet despite this, my mind was still dangerously captured by the depicted glamour of the Roman Empire. Collective efficacy wasn't enough for me. Oh no. Now, the lingering thoughts of legions of troops hoisting their lances and spears in metallic armor, scarlet manskirts and helmet itched my psyche. The perceived thrill of battle and conquer still remained unscratched in my terrible 12-year-old brain. And thus, I had to take us in a new direction.
And so I petitioned our group's bookworm, Abel, to consider using our treehouse not just for hanging out, but in addition to become a center for our collection of sticks and Nerf guns. A sort of armory for a makeshift army I so badly wanted to erect. I was power mad, hungry to grossly appropriate a grossly appropriated image of Roman excellency and military prowess onto my apartment co-conspirators. And so in time, we collected every stick that we found to be durable and at least a meter in length into our treehouse. Meanwhile, I crafted some crude armors from the cardboards of leftover cereal boxes, fashioning them together with the long leaves of the lemongrass plants. With these things in hand, we prepared ourselves for the trimmings of empire-thirsty LARPers. Every day in the fall of 2012 after school, we practiced our sword skills along the dangerous wall of the Great Hill. The boys engaged in makeshift battles, routing each other with the horribly maimed skin of valiants. It got so intense that sometimes parents had to tell us to knock it off. But unbeknownst to us boys, another source of LARPing was afoot. Whilst us boys were preoccupied with their own meanderings, the girls had taken a liking to the very treehouse we had all worked on together. Now initially, we had no problems with the girls using the fort. However, as the sobering winds of October had grasped us by the nostrils, our sight was fixed onto the fact that the girls had taken a peculiar liking to the treehouse. The girls began asserting their own claim to exclusivity over the treehouse, igniting our shared masculo-neurology into an over-inflamed torrent. We were triggered. How dare the girls try to make the fort their own? We're supposed to share. Sharing is care. The tense exchange went on for at least 20 minutes before a boiling point was reached. Whether it was at the pullings of the Roman pantheon or the socially engineered response of toxic masculinity, the boys looked on in unison to one target. Towards the treehouse, which was once ours only half an hour ago, was now the aim of collective aggression. Charge! We hoisted with our collective voices, clinging and climbing up the hill, trying to barge into the fortress. We clamored with the awkward fervency of our dry sticks and cardboard armor, fully ready to use the might of our practiced LARPery. Except, the girls relented before we could even catch a faint whiff of battle, relinquishing their exclusivity to the fact that had we simply finished another treehouse for them earlier, they wouldn't have even bothered. And so we stood there, with the trimmings of self-made warriors stopped in our tracks, due to the fact we had been neglectful of a previous obligation of infrastructure, to instead spend on military antics. Although this is a pitfall as old as US currency, it dawned on me that such matters in the neighborhood could easily fall into fascism. Authoritarian-induced debauchery was a danger that had to be stopped. And so we set our sights on a new ambition. We threw down our sticks and stones and picked up the quill. A new government was to be formed.